we interrupt your regularly scheduled programming to bring you this important news update.
Who's going to get screened and who's going to train them? And if you have a positive, where are you going to bring them? If you have a positive, where are you going to bring them? You're the head of the CDC. Are you stupid? So you'd rather put us in danger. You're the head of the CDC. You find a place to put them and treat them.
They will have another false flag. In fact, the false flag I'm hearing about is a simulated Ebola attack in which they actually use biochemical weapons that dissipate, but then they pretend that it's Ebola.
Thomas Duncan, Ebola man, lied to come here. Now, why did he need to come here? Did he know that after transporting a dying woman refused by a Liberian hospital and sent home to die, that he was then at risk? He is not a U.S. citizen. How is it that he can be granted a visa to come here in a matter of hours? And if our hospitals are all Ebola trained, why, after he told them that he came from Liberia, did the Dallas hospital send him home for yet another 3 days, during which time he became more contagious, vomiting around the apartment complex and exposing kids to the virus, who then go to school?
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Stranger Than Fiction News. Now, I came here to kick some ass, not to waste your time, so let's get started. We're going to peel back the layers behind the Dallas and Madrid Ebola cases. These attacks are looking coordinated, to say the least. The time frames are almost identical in both cases, occurring at the end of September. But to really see the coordination between these two cases, you have to be able to read between the lines to see the undertone of the message. And for that, you need to understand what these undertones are. You have to understand a little bit about what symbols and numbers are all about.
Now I'm going to test you numerology skills by asking you to think about the magic 7. Okay? Most of you will know that 7 is quite a number in all sorts of themes, religions. If we think about 2014, all right, I'm just giving you 2014, you drop the 0, 14, 2 times 7.
So numbers can tell us quite a bit about what's going on. They're like a signature, a temperature reading, if you will. And as far as symbolism goes, there's a deep relationship between numbers and evil. And that's what we're talking about here, evil. Because for coordination to be possible between Madrid and Dallas, then there has to be a network of evil at hand. A matrix of players subscribing to the same philosophy, like a bunch of Charlie Manson groupies. So just ask yourself, how is it that serial killers can receive truckloads of fan mail and wedding proposals each year? It's because the world is full of sociopaths. These people might seem intelligent and articulate, and you meet them every day, but they are sociopaths, like Ted Bundy. And so when these clusters of evil people get together, crazy things begin to happen. Now, these clusters or networks want to brag to each other about what they're doing. And the primary way that they do that is through the use of symbols and numbers. So let's examine the evidence. The Spanish nurse is a Mrs. Teresa Romero, married to a Mr. Javier Romero. Each one of these names has 6 letters in them. And as we see with the Dallas case, Mr. Thomas Duncan, again, we see 6 letters in each name. What a coincidence, you say. Dallas has 6 letters. Madrid has 6 letters. When you start seeing things like that, you can already suspect that something else is going on. Again, numbers are signatures. They're telling you what's going on behind the scenes. And every case has a numerological profile. And I could rattle off examples like the 7/7 attacks in London or MH17 that disappeared on 7/17, but each case is unique, and each case has a numerological signature, and there's always that general theme in these epic cases of evil. So anytime you see an event loaded with 6s, you know you're looking at something inspired by evil, by a bunch of Charlie Manson groupies. So Dallas and Madrid, they're 2 numerological suspicious cases. I'm telling you, where there's smoke, there's fire. Let's look at some of the other specifics. What we call Ebola today was recently renamed the Ebola virus disease by the World Health Organization and is also referred to EVD, as you can see here. And you'll notice that this name is also similar to the other mystery illness currently circulating around the country right now that's called EVD-6A. Now the reason that they're using this EVD so much is because it's an anagram that's short for DEV or devil. Now that might seem a little strange to you, but you see these kind of anagrams in many other places, such as the word Santa, which is short for something else, and it attempts to replace what that season is really about. That's the kind of strategy, the mentality that we're seeing here, that we're up against. And we see these types of anagrams in other words such as DVD, Cadillac, DeVille, but I could go on and on about that. What's worth noting here before we get on to the Dallas and Madrid cases is that the entire outbreak in Africa began allegedly when a 2-year-old passed away on December 6th. Now, that's according to the New England Journal of Medicine, denoted on this flow chart as patient S1. So again, I could go on and on about these types of topics, but let's just move on to the Dallas case. We already know that the Dallas suspect, Mr. Duncan, contracted the disease after exposing himself to an Ebola victim just days before landing in America. We also know that the victim that he exposed himself to passed away the very same day he came into contact with her. I cover that extensively in a video linked that you'll find in the description. So I won't rehash that point, but Mr. Duncan definitely came to America with the malicious intent of spreading Ebola. And it's worth saying that one more time here because he knew full well that he was at high risk before boarding the flight to Dallas. And he did so anyways, at the peril of his friends and family and the American people. He lied on his pre-flight application, saying that he had never been in contact with an Ebola victim. Now, we also know that Mr. Duncan went out of his way and touched as many people as he could and slept in all the beds in the apartment where he was staying so that all of his friends and so that all of his family could become vectors of the disease. Texas state health officials are currently keeping tabs on over 100 potential contacts. So the unofficial number must be at least twice that. And Mr. Duncan was actively seeking to touch people. Remember, common sense here would tell you that if you were in prolonged contact with a confirmed Ebola victim in a confined space that had passed away the very same day you touched her, you know what you're doing. The last thing you'd want to do is fly halfway around the world and come into contact with hundreds of other people while being contagious unless you wanted to do harm. This case only makes sense in the context that Mr. Duncan wanted to spread the disease. Nobody could be that negligent. Nobody could be that stupid. And you see the complicity all along the way. Mr. Duncan gets a visa just hours before boarding the plane.
He is not a U.S. citizen. How is it that he can be granted a visa to come here in a matter of hours?
And he's also brought into a heavily populated city where the disease can spread like a wildfire in a climate where it's just perfect for Ebola to survive. More complicity becomes apparent on the 26th of December when he gets re-released into the population. Apparently those watching him doing his work were like, "You haven't touched enough people yet, Duncan. Go out there and be somebody." The medical staff put him back in the field, right back into the population for another 2 days, knowing full well that he had been to Liberia. They admit that. They knew that. But now their story was like, oh, he had no insurance. Nothing like adding a little scandal to the fire. Evil people love that. Getting people fearful and angry at the same time, that's their joy. Instantly turning large amounts of the population into a bunch of road-raging refugees. Mr. Duncan's mission finally ends when an ambulance goes out to get him. An ambulance they left in circulation for days after picking him up. It's clear that somebody wanted this disease to spread. So eventually, this will be a case of who benefits. Who benefits from a national crisis? The police state, of course. It justifies their existence. Don't be so surprised. Eisenhower warned us of this very thing with his military-industrial complex speech before leaving office. So don't take my word for it, take Mr. Eisenhower's word for it. Unfortunately, we still don't know how many people are going to be hit by this massive first wave of exposure from Dallas. But it's potentially huge. And if kids were exposed, there will be at least 2 waves. First the kids, and then the parents. And then we've got all of the variables in between. So yeah, that's Dallas. Let's jet back to the Madrid case for a moment. Here we see the same scenario, another shady-looking character who was running around the public touching people while being contagious after coming into contact with a person who passed away with Ebola. Nobody knows how she got it, since she was a trained and experienced health professional with better than average gear. 2 scenarios become most probable. Either Ebola is airborne and she got it that way, or she auto-exposed herself, meaning she exposed herself while nobody was paying attention and just waited to incubate, knowing that she would get the best treatment her country could provide while getting the fame associated with having her picture plastered on every paper between here and Timbuktu. Let's look at her picture for a moment. Again, we see that same distant look that we have with Mr. Duncan, never looking at the camera for the picture they're supposedly posing for. Also worth mentioning here as well is that the only pictures that we had of Mr. Duncan initially were those dated December 6th. Now imagine how many people saw that picture and that number along with it. That's part of the plan. It's like product placement. Anyways, another peculiar aspect with the nurse here is her hair. We can clearly see this twin peak phenomenon. A typical hairstyle that we've seen with other sadists before, and for obvious reasons. Remember the James Holmes case? See his hair here? Same mentality, same twin peaks. James Holmes, again, attacked the cinema in Aurora, the Century 16 theater. So we have that 6 again in the theater, and 6 letters in the city of Aurora. Holmes lived at 1690 Paris Street. Duncan, in Texas, was residing at 614. You can just see the theme here clear as day. And you should see the response I get from people when I point this kind of stuff out on my videos. Like this girl, Fifi. What'd I tell you? They're like a bunch of Charlie Manson groupies. One thing for sure here is that this Ebola story is going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. And that's why it's important to bring this out into the open as soon as possible, to confront evil right away and not have it be like 9/11 with Building 7 and Flight 77, where nobody says anything for years and by then it's too late and they got what they wanted. A Patriot Act and endless wars and etc., etc., etc. Until next time.